In the year 2000, the United States Mint released the Massachusetts State Quarter as part of its ambitious and historic 50 State Quarters program. And while at first glance it may seem like just another piece of circulating change, this quarter carries with it a story that spans centuries. It is more than a coin. It is a link to America's colonial past, a symbol of independence, and a carefully crafted piece of numismatic art that has intrigued collectors, historians, and everyday Americans. Since its release, to understand the Massachusetts 2000 quarter, one must first understand the larger context of the 50 State Quarters program, which was one of the most successful coinage programs in American history. Launched in 1999, this program was designed to honor each of the 50 states with a unique reverse design issued in the order that each state ratified the Constitution or was admitted to the Union. The idea was not just to put new designs into circulation, but to engage the public with history, geography, and culture while sparking a new wave of coin collecting. The Massachusetts Quarter was the sixth coin released in the series, and it carries enormous symbolic weight. Massachusetts was the sixth state to ratify the Constitution, doing so on February 6, 1788, and its quarter highlights its role as a cradle of American liberty. The design features the famous outline of the state itself, a bold representation of the geographical boundaries of Massachusetts. Inside the outline is the figure of the Minuteman, a symbol deeply tied to the Revolutionary War and to the spirit of ordinary citizens who rose up to defend their rights. The Minuteman depicted on the coin is based on the iconic statue in Concord, Massachusetts, known as the Minuteman statue, created by Daniel Chester French in 1875. The statue commemorates the farmers and townspeople who became soldiers at a moment's notice during the battles of Lexington and Concord in 1775, battles that marked the start of the American Revolution. By placing this image on the quarter, the Mint paid homage not just to a state, but to a national moment of defiance and the birth of independence. Surrounding the figure of the Minuteman are the words Massachusetts and the Bay State, the official nickname of Massachusetts, a name that harkens back to its identity as one of the earliest English colonies in North America, founded in 1630 around Massachusetts Bay. When the coin entered circulation, it carried immediate historical depth that resonated with both New Englanders and Americans across the nation. But beyond the design itself, there is an entire story of production, mintage, and collecting that makes the Massachusetts Quarter especially fascinating. In 2000, the coin was struck at multiple mints, including Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, resulting in circulation strikes as well as proof coins and special silver proofs. Millions upon millions were produced, making them common in pocket change at the time. But as with all coinage, rarity does not always come from how many were minted, but from the varieties, errors, and the conditions in which coins survive today. Collectors quickly began to identify examples with striking errors such as off-center strikes, double dies, and other minting anomalies, and it is these error coins that today can fetch substantial premiums far beyond the face value of 25 cents. Moreover, condition is everything. A Massachusetts Quarter pulled from circulation in 2000 and carried around in pockets for years may still be interesting, but it holds only sentimental value. A pristine example, graded mint state 67 or higher, however, can become a prized addition to a collection. The history of the Massachusetts Quarter also ties directly into the culture of the early 2000s, when the State Quarter program was reshaping numismatics in the United States. Before 1999, coin collecting had struggled to capture the public imagination in the way it once did, but the State Quarters changed that. Suddenly millions of Americans were looking at their change more closely, hunting for each new release, filling maps and albums that the Mint and private companies sold, and teaching younger generations about history through coinage. The Massachusetts Quarter was among the first wave of these issues, and so it holds a special place as part of that revival of popular coin collecting. But if we step even deeper into history, the Massachusetts Quarter becomes a kind of portal to the larger story of Massachusetts itself, the colony. and later the state has been central to nearly every chapter of American history, from the landing of the Pilgrims in 1620 to the Revolutionary War to the growth of industry, literature, and higher education in the centuries that followed. The Minuteman at its center reminds us that Massachusetts was where the Revolution began, where the first shots were fired, and where the spirit of liberty was defended with ordinary citizens' courage. The decision to place the outline of the state alongside the Minuteman was deliberate and meaningful. It was a way of saying that the land itself, and the people who lived on it, were inseparable from the idea of freedom. The Massachusetts Bay Colony, founded by Puritans in the 17th century, had long been associated with ideals of self-governance, religious independence, and community identity, and these threads continued into the Revolutionary era when Massachusetts leaders like Samuel Adams, John Adams, and Paul Revere helped ignite the flame of resistance against British rule. The quarter, therefore, is more than a small piece of metal. It is a miniature history book pressed into copper and nickel. It connects the pocket change of an ordinary citizen in the year 2000 with events that unfolded over 2 centuries earlier on the battlefields and commons of colonial Massachusetts. And if we look at the production side, the Massachusetts quarter also marked an era when the mint was pushing the limits of design and public engagement. Designing a state quarter was no small task. The process involved the governor of Massachusetts forming a committee, proposals being submitted, designs being reviewed by the U.S. Commission of Fine Arts and the Citizens Commemorative Coin Advisory Committee, and finally approval from the Secretary of the Treasury. The chosen design had to balance historical symbolism, artistic quality, and technical practicality. For mass production, in the end, the choice of the Minuteman was almost inevitable because of its deep cultural resonance. Yet, what fascinates collectors today is not only the history behind the design, but the lasting impact of these quarters on the hobby of numismatics. Coin dealers across the country reported massive increases in traffic in 2000, and many families began collecting quarters together for the first time, often with children learning geography by hunting down the states in circulation. Today, some of the rarest Massachusetts quarters are those struck in proof silver, which were not intended for general circulation, but sold in sets to collectors. The beauty of these coins lies not only in their gleaming surfaces, but in their symbolism, as treasures that combine art history and tangible wealth. And as with every coin in the series, the Massachusetts quarter offers us an opportunity to reflect on how coins serve as storytellers of national identity. They are everyday objects that pass through countless hands, yet they preserve images of battles, leaders, and values that have shaped the nation. The Massachusetts 2000 quarter encapsulates the bravery of citizen soldiers, the heritage of one of America's oldest states, and the revival of numismatics at the dawn of the new millennium. And when we consider its place in history, it becomes clear that this is not just a coin, it is a time capsule and a teaching tool. It is a reminder that the smallest pieces of change can hold the biggest stories, and that is why the Massachusetts 2000 quarter continues to captivate collectors and historians alike, and why its story could fill hours of discussion without ever exhausting its meaning. Imagine holding a coin in your hand that is not just change from a store or a toll booth, but a tiny piece of American history, a sliver of metal that tells the story of a state, its people, its landmarks, and its dreams. This is not just any quarter. This is the 2001 New York State quarter, a coin that marked the entrance of New York into the legendary 50 state quarters program, a program that changed the way Americans looked at their pocket change forever. When the United States Mint launched the 50 state quarters program in 1999, it was unlike anything the American public had seen in the world of coinage before. Instead of the same old eagle reverse that had appeared on the Washington quarter since 1932, suddenly, the reverse would change. Every few months, each new design representing a different state, telling its own story carved in metal. This program immediately caught the imagination of millions of Americans, from lifelong numismatists to school children collecting quarters in colorful folders, and it quickly became the most popular coin program in United States history. And among all those quarters released, the 2001 New York quarter holds a special place, not only because New York is one of the most iconic and influential states in the nation, but because of the powerful symbolism chosen for the design, which captured history, art, and national identity in a way that still resonates today. The New York Quarter was released on January 2, 2001. It was the first quarter issued in the year 2001 and the 11th overall in the series. The design was selected through a process involving both the state government and the United States Mint. Like every other state quarter, New York was invited to submit design concepts that best represented its history, geography, culture, and achievements. Thousands of ideas poured in from New Yorkers, including suggestions for famous figures like Alexander Hamilton and Franklin D. Roosevelt, famous landmarks such as the Brooklyn Bridge or the Empire State Building, and symbols ranging from apples to skyscrapers. But ultimately, the design chosen would center around the most famous symbol of New York, and perhaps of America itself, the Statue of Liberty. The final design of the New York State Quarter features the Statue of Liberty in the foreground, with her torch raised high. Behind her stretches an outline of the state of New York. Etched into the map is a line tracing the path of the Hudson River, and extending outward is a set of lines that represent the gateways of freedom and the role of New York as a portal for millions of immigrants who entered America through Ellis Island and New York Harbor. At the bottom of the design is the legend "Gateway to Freedom," a phrase that sums up not only the immigrant story, but also the ideals of liberty and opportunity that New York has long symbolized. This design was created by artist Alfred Miletsky, a sculptor engraver of the United States Mint, who was tasked with bringing the state's chosen elements to life on the small canvas of a coin. The challenge of the State Quarters program was always to compress vast histories and cultural identities into a design barely larger than the size of a fingernail. Yet, in the case of the New York Quarter, Miletsky managed to merge geography, symbolism, and identity in a clear, powerful composition. The Statue of Liberty dominates the design, her arm lifted high. The state outline anchors the image to its geography, and the legend ties the story together in three simple words. Timing of the release of the New York Quarter in 2001 gives it a poignant historical place in American memory. The coin was launched in January, months before the tragic events of September 11 that year, but after those attacks, the imagery of the Statue of Liberty and the phrase "Gateway to Freedom" took on even greater meaning for Americans, who saw in the coin a reminder of resilience, of national identity, and of New York's role at the heart of the American story. For collectors and historians, this gave the New York Quarter a special aura that few other state quarters could match in terms of minting. The New York Quarter was struck at both the Philadelphia Mint and the Denver Mint as circulating coins in copper nickel-clad composition, which is the standard alloy for modern quarters, consisting of a pure copper core layered with cupronickel, giving the coin its silver-like appearance. The proof versions were struck at the San Francisco Mint in both clad and 90% silver editions for collectors. Altogether, hundreds of millions of New York quarters were produced, making it one of the most widely distributed coins in the program. While the clad business strike coins are common in circulation, the silver proofs and high-grade mint state examples are sought after by collectors. From a technical perspective, the coin measures 26 millimeters in diameter and weighs 5.67 grams, with the reeded edge identical in size and weight to all other Washington quarters. Since 1965, on the obverse, as required by law, appears the traditional portrait of George Washington, designed originally by John Flanagan in 1932, but modified slightly for the State Quarters program by mint sculptor engraver William Cousins. This continuity linked the new state designs with the long heritage of the Washington Quarter. Cultural and historical significance of the New York Quarter runs deep, because New York has always been a focal point of American identity. Founded originally as a Dutch colony called New Amsterdam in the early 1600s, the territory later became an English colony renamed New York, after the Duke of York, and eventually one of the original 13 states of the Union. New York has played a pivotal role in every era of American history, from the Revolutionary War, when General Washington made his stand against the British, to the 19th century, when New York Harbor became the front door to America for immigrants from Europe, to the 20th century, when New York City rose as a global capital of finance, culture, and diplomacy. Encapsulating all of that history into a coin was no easy task, yet the Statue of Liberty alone manages to evoke much of it, since the statue itself is not only a gift from France commemorating the friendship between the two nations during the American Revolution, but also a symbol that greeted millions of newcomers arriving in search of a better life. Collectors of the New York Quarter often note its symbolic resonance in connection with numismatic history as well. The State Quarters program rekindled widespread public interest in coin collecting, something that had been waning in the late 20th century as fewer people handled coins regularly, and as the designs had remained static for decades. Suddenly, every few months a new design appeared in circulation, sparking conversations among families, classrooms, and communities. The New York Quarter in particular stood out because of its instantly recognizable Statue of Liberty motif, which appealed even to casual observers who might not know the details of coinage history. Economically, the 50 State Quarters program also had a massive impact. According to estimates from the United States Mint, the program generated billions of dollars in seigniorage revenue, that is, the profit made when coins are produced at a cost lower than their face value. Collectors removed millions of quarters from circulation, keeping them in albums or jars, which meant the government essentially sold 25 cents worth of metal and copper nickel for 25 cents. But never had to redeem it. That kind of impact was felt across all state quarters, but with the New York Quarter's popularity, it contributed significantly to the success of the year's numismatic grading services such as PCGs and NGC have certified thousands of New York quarters in mint state and proof condition high-grade examples, especially those graded Ms. 67 or Ms. 68. Can fetch premium prices. Although the coin is common in circulation, its popularity ensures a strong collector base. The silver-proof versions with their mirrored fields and frosted devices are especially prized by those who enjoy the artistry of the design rendered in precious metal rather than base alloy. In terms of symbolism, the Gateway to Freedom legend resonates deeply in the American imagination because it links the immigrant experience with the values of liberty and opportunity. For generations, people arrived at Ellis Island after long journeys across the Atlantic. They saw the Statue of Liberty towering above the harbor, and they felt a mixture of relief, hope, and possibility. The New York Quarter, by including that phrase, effectively condensed that emotional story into a circulating coin, reminding everyone who used it of that journey and the ideals it represented. The coin also carries with it a lesson about the role of design in public history. Coins are everyday objects that pass from hand to hand, but they also function as miniature monuments. They are art, history, and narrative rolled into a pocket-sized form. The New York Quarter demonstrates how a small coin can tell a vast story, bridging the past and the present and leaving an imprint not only in metal but in memory. In the year 2002, the United States Mint unveiled one of its most iconic releases within the monumental 50 State Quarters program, the Tennessee State Quarter, a coin that was not merely a piece of currency, but a carefully crafted symbol of the cultural identity, historical journey, and musical legacy of the volunteer state. To understand why this coin is more than just 25 cents in your pocket, we must travel back into the depths of Tennessee history, its traditions, its struggles, and its triumphs. Tennessee became the 16th state admitted to the Union in 1796, a land carved from the wilderness, shaped by pioneers, and destined to hold a central role in the American story. The Tennessee Quarter, designed by sculptor and engraver Thomas D. Rogers Sr., was released on January 2, 2002, and instantly captured the hearts of collectors, not simply for its striking imagery, but because it told a tale of a state whose influence on America was profound. On the reverse of the coin, we see a carefully composed design representing Tennessee's greatest contribution to the nation: music. The design features 3 distinct instruments, a fiddle, a trumpet, and a guitar, each symbolizing a different genre that took root in Tennessee. and spread its influence worldwide. The fiddle stands for country music, a genre born in the Appalachian Mountains, nurtured by folk traditions, and forever tied to Nashville, known as the Music City. The trumpet pays homage to the rich heritage of blues and jazz that flourished in Memphis, a city that gave the world legends like B.B. King, and where Beale Street became a crucible of sound and innovation. And the guitar represents rock and roll, for Tennessee is the home of Sun Records, the birthplace of Elvis Presley, Johnny Cash, Jerry Lee Lewis, and Carl Perkins. It was in Memphis that the world first heard the crackling sound of rebellion that would sweep across continents, transforming culture forever and binding Tennessee to the very soul of American music. The design also incorporates 3 stars, echoing the Tennessee state flag. Each star represents one of the 3 grand divisions of the state: East, Middle, and West Tennessee, symbolizing unity across diverse regions. And woven into this imagery is a banner that reads "Musical Heritage," proudly proclaiming to the world that Tennessee is not only a place on a map, but the heartbeat of American sound. The obverse of the coin, like all quarters in the state quarter program, features the portrait of George Washington, designed by John Flanagan. But beneath this familiar profile lies an era of transition. As collectors will know, the 2002 Tennessee quarter was struck at multiple mints: Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, with both clad and proof versions, making it a fascinating study for numismatists. To appreciate the Tennessee quarter fully, one must step back and explore why music became such a defining force in Tennessee history. In the early 1800s, as settlers streamed into the Appalachian frontier, they carried with them the ballads, fiddle tunes, and folk songs of Scotland, Ireland, and England. These traditions blended with African rhythms and spirituals brought by enslaved people, forming a cultural fusion that, over generations, gave birth to what we know as country music. Nashville rose to prominence first as a publishing hub, with the establishment of the famous Ryman Auditorium, and later the Grand Ole Opry, which broadcast music into households nationwide, making Tennessee synonymous with country sound. Memphis developed a different tradition as African American musicians shaped the blues. Drawing from hardship, joy, and everyday struggles, the Mississippi Delta blues artists brought their sound northward, and Memphis became their stage, a city where W.C. Handy, known as the father of the blues, composed the Memphis Blues, and Beale Street echoed with the energy of performers who shaped jazz and rhythm and blues, leading ultimately to the rise of rock and roll. Sun Records became legendary in the 1950s as producer Sam Phillips discovered young artists whose raw energy and unique voices electrified the world. When Elvis Presley recorded "That's All Right" in 1954, the walls of musical history shook in Tennessee forever claimed its place as the birthplace of rock and roll. So the Tennessee quarter is not just a coin, it is a small round canvas that celebrates centuries of cultural convergence and innovation. To the collector, it offers both artistic beauty and historical depth. Minted in the millions, it was distributed widely across the nation, and yet high-grade, uncirculated, and proof examples remain desirable among numismatists, especially those struck in silver proof sets by the San Francisco Mint. But to truly understand the weight of this coin, one must also place it within the larger context of the 50 State Quarters Program, a program authorized by the 50 States Commemorative Coin Program Act of 1997 and launched in 1999. This initiative by the U.S. Mint became the most successful coin program in American history, capturing the interest of the public, sparking new generations of collectors, and educating millions about the diverse heritage of each state. Tennessee's release in 2002 marked the 16th issue, aligning with its historic admission to the Union, and it stood out among the coins for its unique embrace of culture rather than solely political or natural symbols. Other states celebrated landmarks or events, but Tennessee boldly proclaimed its identity through music, a choice that reflected both pride and truth. Tennessee's role in shaping American sound cannot be overstated when one examines the broader narrative, from the fiddle tunes of the mountains to the trumpet calls of jazz clubs to the strumming guitar chords of rock and roll. Tennessee's influence is global. The coin therefore serves not just as a reminder of the past, but as a recognition of an ongoing legacy that continues to inspire artists worldwide. For collectors studying the Tennessee Quarter means diving deep into mintages, varieties, and errors. The Philadelphia Mint produced over 361 million examples, while the Denver Mint struck more than 286 million. San Francisco contributed both clad and silver-proof strikes, each adding to the complexity of the series. Among these coins, enthusiasts often search for high-grade specimens with sharp strikes, full detail, and flawless surfaces, those graded Ms. 68 or higher by professional grading services command significant premiums in the market. Errors, too, capture the fascination of collectors. Off-center strikes, double dies, and other mint anomalies make certain Tennessee quarters worth far more than face value, turning what was intended as ordinary change into a rarity of numismatic importance beyond its monetary or collecting value. The Tennessee Quarter is a window into American identity, a reminder that coins are not only instruments of commerce but storytellers. Minted in metal, each state quarter tells a tale, and Tennessee's is one of struggle, creativity, resilience, and above all sound. For 2 centuries, Tennessee has been a crossroads where cultures collide and new art forms emerge, and this quarter ensures that every time someone holds it, they are holding a piece of that legacy. Whether it is the country twang of a fiddle, the soulful cry of a trumpet, or the electrifying strum of a guitar, Tennessee's quarter speaks with the universal language of music, and that is why among the 50 quarters, it remains one of the most iconic, beloved, and culturally significant. Now, as you hold a Tennessee quarter in your hand, or look at it under the glass of a collector's case, consider not only the mintage date or the mint mark, but the centuries of history and sound it represents. This is not just metal, this is a story in your palm, and that is why for coin collectors, historians, and music lovers alike, the Tennessee State Quarter of 2002 will always be far more than 25 cents. It will be a symbol of heritage and a tribute to the state that gave the world its musical heartbeat. Imagine reaching into your pocket and pulling out what appears to be an ordinary quarter, a coin that countless people exchange every single day without a second thought. Yet when you hold the 2020 Marsh-Billings Rockefeller National Historical Park Quarter, you are holding far more than 25 cents. You are holding a story that stretches across 2 centuries, a legacy that begins with the voice of one of America's earliest environmental thinkers, George Perkins Marsh, continues with the vision and determination of the railroad magnate turned conservationist, Frederick Billings, and is carried forward by the Rockefeller family, who transformed a private estate into a gift for the entire nation. This coin is not just a token of currency, it is a miniature monument, a bridge between past, present, and future, and a reminder that conservation is not a single act, but a continuous responsibility passed from one generation to the next. It represents a movement that began with words written in 1864 about the dangers of deforestation, and grew into a living laboratory where sustainable forestry was practiced long before the term was widely known. It embodies the ideals of stewardship that Lawrence Rockefeller would later enshrine in our national park system, and it marks the first and only time the United States Mint placed the theme of conservation so directly at the center of its design. When you look closely at the reverse of this coin, you see a young girl kneeling to plant a Norway spruce sapling within the forests of Vermont, a quiet but powerful image that says everything about our responsibility to those who will come after us. This is not just an image of a child and a tree, it is the visual language of legacy, responsibility, and hope, cast into metal and circulated into the hands of millions. The Marsh-Billings Rockefeller Quarter is a story of land, a story of people, a story of ideas. And today, we are going to journey deep into its history, following the thread from a 19th century thinker who warned that careless destruction of nature would bring disaster to a 20th century philanthropist who believed that parks could heal both land and people, and finally, to the 21st century coin that placed all of these ideals into the palm of your hand. Imagine holding a single quarter in your hand, a piece of American history that not only carries 25 cents of value, but tells the story of a legacy, a park, a family, and a vision for conservation that reaches back across centuries. This is not just spare change, it is a monument in miniature, and today, we are going to unlock the story behind the 2020 Marsh-Billings Rockefeller National Historical Park Quarter. Marsh-Billings Rockefeller National Historical Park Quarter issued in 2020 as part of the America the Beautiful Quarters program represents far more than a commemorative piece of coinage. It embodies the spirit of environmental conservation, the rich legacy of stewardship passed down through multiple generations, and the enduring commitment to preserving the landscapes and resources that define the American identity. To understand the depth of this coin and the park it honors, we must first step back into the life and times of George Perkins Marsh, whose vision and writings helped to awaken a nation to the consequences of unchecked industrialization and deforestation. Born in 1801 in Woodstock, Vermont, Marsh was a lawyer, a diplomat, a congressman, and most importantly, one of the earliest voices to recognize the delicate balance between humanity and the natural world. His seminal work Man and Nature, published in 1864, is often cited as one of the founding texts of the modern conservation movement. Within its pages, Marsh articulated a revolutionary idea for his time that human actions could drastically alter the environment, that the forests, rivers, and soils which sustained life were not inexhaustible, and that careless exploitation would bring consequences not only for the present generation, but for those to come. This intellectual seed took root across the nation, inspiring later leaders to rethink the way Americans approached land use and natural resource property that would eventually become the Marsh-Billings Rockefeller National Historical Park. Is itself a living timeline of American conservation thought. It began as the Marsh family estate, a place where George Perkins Marsh spent his formative years observing the forests and landscapes that would inspire his lifelong passion for environmental balance. After Marsh, the property came into the hands of Frederick Billings, a railroad magnate from Woodstock who admired Marsh and was deeply influenced by his writings. Billings sought to put Marsh's conservation philosophy into practice, transforming the estate into a model of sustainable forestry and progressive land management. In the late 19th century, at a time when clear-cutting and resource extraction were rampant, Billings was experimenting with reforestation techniques, planting trees on denuded hillsides, and demonstrating that careful stewardship could restore health to the land. His estate became not just a home, but a living laboratory of conservation. This story did not end with Billings. In the mid-20th century, the estate passed to the Rockefeller family, specifically to Lawrence S. Rockefeller, a philanthropist and conservationist whose work helped shape the preservation of national parks across the United States. Lawrence Rockefeller recognized the historical and ecological importance of the property, and in 1992, he and his wife, Mary French Rockefeller, a direct descendant of Frederick Billings, donated the estate to the American people, establishing the Marsh-Billings Rockefeller National Historical Park. It became the first national park in the United States to focus explicitly on the history and legacy of conservation, a fitting tribute to the three families whose lives were intertwined with the property and whose values carried forward the mission of stewardship. The 2020 quarter depicting the park captures this layered legacy in its design. On the reverse side, created by artist Donna Weaver and sculpted by Michael Gaudioso, the image shows a young girl planting a Norway spruce sapling within the managed forest of the park. This choice of imagery is powerful and symbolic. It speaks to the intergenerational responsibility of conservation, reminding us that planting a tree is not for the planter alone, but for the generations who will sit in its shade, benefit from its roots, and inherit its role in the ecosystem. The young girl represents the future, the act of planting represents commitment, and the forest backdrop represents the continuity of human stewardship from Marsh to Billings to Rockefeller, and onward into the present. From a numismatic perspective, the Marsh-Billings Rockefeller Quarter is part of the larger America the Beautiful Quarters program, which ran from 2010 to 2021 and honored 56 national parks and historic sites across the nation. The program sought not only to celebrate the physical beauty of America's landscapes, but also to educate the public about the cultural and environmental heritage that these sites preserve. The Vermont Quarter, released in 2020, holds a special place within this series because of its unique focus on conservation history. While many quarters depict dramatic natural landmarks or iconic park scenes, this one depicts action, human responsibility, and the planting of a future. ChatGap said, in the year 2000, the United States Mint unveiled one of the most symbolic and history-rich pieces of the legendary 50-state quarters program, and among these treasures stands the South Carolina State Quarter, a coin that does far more than simply represent 25 cents in American currency. It serves as a compact storybook, a miniature history lesson, and a timeless tribute to one of the most influential states in the birth and shaping of the nation. When you hold the South Carolina 2000 quarter in your hand, you are not just looking at a small piece of metal, you are holding a doorway into a journey that stretches back hundreds of years, a story of exploration of colonial power, struggles of revolution of culture, and of the birth of American identity. South Carolina was the 8th state to ratify the United States Constitution, and it is often referred to as the Palmetto State, a title that is proudly featured on the coin's reverse design. This coin struck in the year 2000 depicts not just a simple tree or a random design, it captures the sable palmetto, the state tree, which once played a vital role in defending Charleston from British naval bombardments during the Revolutionary War. As cannonballs struck the soft yet resilient palmetto logs, they were absorbed rather than shattered, saving lives and fortifications, and the symbolism carried through history, making the palmetto a lasting icon of courage, strength, and resistance. The quarter also highlights the outline of the state itself, with the star marking the capital city of Columbia, while surrounding the map are 3 other important elements: the palmetto tree, the Carolina wren, which is the state bird, and the yellow jessamine, the vibrant state flower. Together, these symbols reflect not only the natural beauty of South Carolina, but also its cultural identity and its deep connection to the land. The quarter's motto proudly reads, "The Palmetto State," reminding every American who sees it of the powerful role the state played in shaping the course of national destiny. But to truly appreciate the South Carolina 2000 quarter, one must dive much deeper into the story behind it, because South Carolina was not merely another colony, it was one of the wealthiest and most influential during the 18th century, and it played a central role in both the American Revolution and later in the Civil War. The roots of South Carolina's history stretch back to the late 1600s, when English settlers established the Carolina colony, supported by the Lords Proprietors granted land by King Charles II. Over time, the colony split into North and South Carolina, with the Southern Territory becoming a hub of rice, indigo, and later cotton plantations, which shaped both its prosperity and its dependence on enslaved labor. This reality made South Carolina both an economic powerhouse and a flashpoint of conflict, as the ideals of liberty and equality clashed with the system of slavery, upon which so much wealth was built. As the Revolution approached, South Carolina's strategic port city of Charleston became one of the most important battlegrounds. The defense of Sullivan's Island in 1776, where palmetto logs absorbed British cannon fire, gave rise to the symbol immortalized on the state flag, and later on the quarter. This victory boosted morale across the colonies, proving that the seemingly invincible British Empire could be resisted. But South Carolina's story did not end with independence. It became a stage for debates over federal power versus state sovereignty, and was the first state to secede from the Union in 1860, leading directly into the Civil War. Its capital, Columbia, was burned during Sherman's march, and its people endured profound hardship. Yet out of this turmoil, South Carolina rebuilt itself, preserving its cultural traditions while adapting to a new American reality. The South Carolina quarter, released on May 22, 2000, was the 8th coin of the series, and its circulation sparked immense public interest. Collectors rushed to acquire pristine examples of the coin, and the design was praised for capturing a balance between natural beauty, historical power, and state pride. Millions of these quarters were minted at both the Philadelphia and Denver mints, but what makes some of them especially fascinating to collectors today are the error coins, those rare pieces that feature off-center strikes, double dies, or other minting anomalies which can make a coin worth far more than its face value beyond its monetary value. However, the South Carolina quarter embodies a layered story that could fill hours of discussion, from the indigenous tribes who lived on the land before European colonization to the struggles of enslaved Africans who built much of its early economy, to the voices of revolutionaries who fought for liberty, to the resilience of communities who rebuilt after war and disaster. Each chapter of South Carolina's history echoes through the simple yet powerful imagery chosen for its quarter. This coin is a miniature textbook, one that sparks questions about why certain symbols were chosen, what they meant to people in the year 2000, and how they reflect the centuries of history before them. To explore it fully is to embark on a 2-hour journey into the politics, the culture, the wars, the struggles, the natural heritage, and the enduring pride of the Palmetto State. So when you look at the South Carolina 2000 quarter, you are not just holding a coin, you are holding a story of resilience, of heritage, and of a state that has shaped the destiny of America from its very beginnings to the modern day. And that story is one that deserves to be told in full, with the depth, detail, and passion that this tiny yet mighty piece of history demonstrates. South Carolina 2000 quarter is not only a coin of circulation, it is a historical monument struck in miniature form. It is the 8th coin released in the 50-state quarters program, and it reflects the pride, resilience, and spirit of a state that has long stood at the center of the American story. The very act of placing the outline of South Carolina, a coin with a star marking the capital of Columbia, reminds every collector and every casual observer that this is a state with a legacy both geographically and historically central to the Union and its conflicts. The palmetto tree standing tall beside the outline is not a random artistic choice, it is a carefully chosen emblem of defense, independence, and endurance. For when the British warships sailed against the palmetto log fortifications at Sullivan's Island, they expected their cannon fire to shatter the defenses and scatter the colonists. Instead, the spongy wood absorbed the iron shots, turning what should have been destruction into resilience. This moment elevated the palmetto tree into legend and ensured its place not only on the flag, but on every emblem representing the state, and now on the quarter itself. But the symbolism of the quarter does not stop there. The Carolina wren, perched upon the map, is a reminder of South Carolina's natural world. This small bird, with its strong voice, is the official state bird chosen because it thrives in both rural and urban landscapes, representing adaptability and persistence, traits that mirror the people of South Carolina who, through wars, natural disasters, and economic changes, have always found ways to survive and flourish. The yellow jessamine, which wraps itself gracefully into the design, adds another layer of meaning. This flower, known for its bright golden color and fragrance, represents beauty, resilience, and growth, even in challenging conditions. It is a flower that blossoms early in the spring, symbolizing renewal and hope, and together with the wren and the palmetto tree, it creates a triad of natural symbols that reflect the environment, heritage, and identity of the palmetto state. To understand why this quarter resonates so deeply, one must trace the long path of South Carolina's history, for the land was originally home to native peoples like the Catawba and Cherokee, who thrived for centuries before European arrival. Their cultures shaped the land through trade networks, hunting practices, and diplomacy, but by the time English settlers arrived in the late 17th century, much of their land and way of life would be displaced. South Carolina was originally part of the larger Carolina colony, named in honor of King Charles II. The Lords Proprietors were given wide authority, and the colony quickly became an agricultural powerhouse. Rice and indigo flourished in the fertile coastal plains, worked by enslaved Africans who brought not only their labor, but their cultural traditions, knowledge of rice cultivation, and resilience in the face of unimaginable hardship. These contributions became part of the foundation of South Carolina's identity, an identity built upon a complicated mixture of wealth, tradition, struggle, and survival.